I am encouraged by kids in school nowadays. There's a lot of kids, we hear about the bad stuff, but there's a lot of kids that really want to make a difference. They really do. And my father's, the way he made a difference, he went into the Army and fought in the Second World War. I mean, that was their contribution. Hopefully we don't have that. But there's a lot of kids that are looking, and kids, I mean people 25 and under, really. I mean, pardon me for calling you a kid, but there's a lot of people out there looking for something different in their life. They want to make a difference. And we are, you're not going to be the wealthiest person in the world, but we pay competitive wages. And, if I hire an accountant tomorrow, I've got to pay a reasonable amount or nobody going to come. So there are ways out there to help, and it's worth exploring. I mean, I never thought I'd be sitting in this chair, ever. But 22 years of this at LifeCare Alliance, and I am so honored and privileged to do this job every day, and I'm just like, I work very hard at it because I don't want to mess it up.
We are looking forward our way from Studio C in the 511 studios in the Brewery District. That's just south of downtown Columbus, Ohio. Hi, this is Brett. One issue Carol and I have wanted to cover is the challenge of food insecurity, particularly with older adults, but truly, really, with all families in Central Ohio.
Brett, many of us have never had a hungry day in our lives, yet so many in our community were in dire situations even before the pandemic and now are on the verge of disasters. Nearly 1 million people live in the city of Columbus, which has an 18% poverty rate. It's 170,000 people just in our city. So let's welcome Chuck Gehring, who is the CEO and president of LifeCare Alliance, as our guest today. Chuck is going to help us unpack this information and see where we are headed on these critical issues.
Hello.
Hey.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. We've got a lot to talk about today, but I think it would behoove us to hear a little bit more about you and your journey at LifeCare Alliance.
Well, I've been the CEO of LifeCare Alliance for 22 years this month, and it's
congratulations.
Wonderful. But they haven't fired me yet, so that's a good thing. But I started out, I spent 20 plus years in for-profit. I was with, I was an accounting undergrad at the Ohio State University.
Go Bucks.
And started in public accounting briefly, and then spent the decade of the 80s, or actually the decade of the 2000s, because I'm only 29 years old. But anyway, decade of the 80s with Anheuser-Busch.
Oh.
Finance and operations, and then with a food service company for much of the 90s. But what happened, I was the person they sent oftentimes to talk to some of the nonprofits. I was not the philanthropy person. We didn't have one of those. But they'd go and say, hey, find out what they need and what they want.
Really?
I was put on a lot of boards, especially at Anheuser. It was important that we were in the community because of the product we made. And I got to know the nonprofit community, and it was really interesting to me. And so 22 years ago, here I am. I got here, and here I am. So I did go almost out of state to Xavier for an MBA, but I've been here. I grew up on the west side. I'm a hilltopper, and so I've been here a long time. And
some incredible people on the hilltop who've done a lot for our city.
Yeah, and I love it here, so I don't know that I need to live anyplace else.
Wonderful.
Isn't that amazing where your career path will take you? You don't even, you go to school for one thing and all of a sudden you realize, somebody will tell you, but you know what? In the 2000s, you're going to be at a nonprofit doing this. You go, no, that's what I'm going to school for.
That's
Isn't
right.
That amazing?
That's right. And I never thought of that because I was just trying to get up as high as I could at Anheuser-Busch in the 80s, and we were prepared to move. It was really dumb luck that I was not shipped off someplace. I got promoted a couple times right in Columbus, which was a real oddity for Anheuser. My boss, who hired me, who I still talk to and love, moved 13 times. And but during the time I had at Anheuser, we had 4 little kids. And so we thought, we better think about this a little bit.
Wonderful. So, not too many people admit to being Columbusites, being born and bred in Franklin County.
Oh, I was born and bred on the hilltop, and I just think it's a wonderful place. Hilltop's changed a little bit, and it's funny because after all that for-profit experience, you roam around, you're everywhere, and you come back down. I went down because somebody said you need to go down and interview with these people, Gehring, and I went down LifeCare Alliance, and I said, this is where I used to ride my bike as a kid.
Right.
And it was just, I thought this was going to be, I said, this is dumb. I'm not coming down here. But then, you know what happened? My parents both ended up with a form of dementia, and they were about a mile away from the office. And that was kind of a godsend for many years because I was able to run over and take them out after work or help them out or whatever it was. And we went through almost a decade of horrendous stuff with them. And then I had to move them. And so I'm kind of a person that believes in fate, and you end up where you're supposed to end up.
Absolutely.
And I think I've ended up where I'm supposed to end up.
Absolutely. I grew up in Linden, and when the Linden Park was renovated, got a chance to go to a meeting there, and I was just walking around going, this is pretty cool. You know, I used to play tennis here and, you know, basketball over there. And
Well, and a lot of people don't like that, but I think it's great.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think it's good my kids grew up here and stuff, and instead of some faraway place. And this is a wonderful community. It really is. And it's they're just so generous, and it's the place to be, and a lot of good things get done here.
Well, and a lot of good people like you, Chuck, who are doing great things for our community. So kudos to you, and congratulations on your 22 years. We're glad you're celebrating with us today. Good.
Same to you, Carol. You've done a lot of good stuff here, too.
We've had fun doing it, too. So I guess we're going to move on here after our patting each other on the back. We Columbusites who do that well. So, Chuck, in 2020, the state of Ohio published the Poverty Report, stating that Ohio had a 13.9% poverty rate. That's 1.5 million people. Franklin County is not only higher in percentage than the rest of the state, but also nationally, which is only 13.1%. Unfortunately, Columbus has had a large population of those in need for decades. LifeCare Alliance has been a major factor in our community since 1898. Now, you weren't there when it started. Not that long ago.
No, smart aleck. But
I just had to put that in there. So tell us more about the history of LifeCare Alliance, its mission, and the individuals who met those challenges of poverty so long ago.
Well, I tell you that, first of all, I think the poverty percentage that you just quoted, which I understand is the percentage, I think is low.
Probably.
Because it's how you look at poverty. I mean, those are numbers, but there's a lot of people who just struggle from day to day with food insecurities and just being able to pay. We see them all the time. We pay a lot of rents and utilities at our place. And it's the stories, and people think, oh, well, why aren't they paying their bills and things like that. These people are doing the best they can. And it really is, and we're just creating this circle of problems sometimes because, you know, when the child in the household gets into 7th and 8th grade, there's no parent that can do the math homework with them or anything like that. And it just makes it a very difficult situation. And we still have, this is a high-end city. This is, you know, we've always said because it's a state capital, there's great employment. You have the major university here and things like that. But there's still a lot of people who are making under $15 an hour.
Right.
And I don't know, even with two people earning $15 an hour, how you do very well with that. But LifeCare Alliance goes back to 1898. We're 125 years old this year, and this is the 50th anniversary also of the Meals on Wheels program with us. So it's a big year. And I would tell you that we were founded by a woman named Catherine Nelson Black, who went by Carrie. And in 1897 and 8, she went on a train to Chicago and Philadelphia to look at a new thing called the district nursing office. There were no health departments in those days. And Carol, you know, in 1898, could you vote as a woman?
No.
And she's out founding agencies. So she came back and said, we got to do something about this. There's too many people using hospital emergency rooms as waiting rooms and for colds and things they didn't know about, and there was no in-home care.
Right.
And we just didn't have the nursing homes and these beautiful senior, independent living facilities we have today. So it was, what can we do about this? And she founded LifeCare Alliance to take care of those, as she said, nobody else pays any attention to back in 1898. But the design was to do nursing and in-home care in the streets and in the homes to keep you out of a hospital and keep you happy and healthy where you wanted to live. And we're still doing that today.
Isn't that amazing?
We're still doing that today, and I try to follow that. We've got the original minutes book, and I try to follow her guidance all the time as to what did they want. And I know things change and things have to be updated, and you get into new situations and things like that. But she was amazing. She went on in 1906 to found the Tuberculosis Society, which was the disease of the day, now called Central Ohio Breathing Association, or COBA. And then in 1921, she founded the first free cancer clinic in the country, called the Columbus Cancer Clinic. And that was independent from 1921 to 2005, at which time it merged into us. And we took it because our clients needed their services, not because of Carrie necessarily, but she was a driving force in all this stuff. And we just felt like we had to help out. And that is now, the Columbus Cancer Clinic is now the last free cancer clinic in the state of Ohio and for all states touching Ohio. Think through that one. And the reason is, of course, money. And we're blessed to be able to carry it on, and some other partnerships that we have. We took on Central Ohio Diabetes in 2017. We took on Diabetes Dayton in 20. We can talk about other things. Project Open Hand back in 04, which is basically Meals on Wheels for people with HIV and AIDS, which is a big thing in Columbus, Ohio. So we serve seniors and medically challenged through nutrition and healthcare. That's what we say about ourselves. And medically challenged person is somebody who's under senior age, which is 60 to the feds, but they have a medical challenge that causes them to assess out as in needing these services as a older person might.
Okay. You know, it's amazing that she went to Chicago to get information on this nursing group. As a sociology major at Otterbein and Ohio State, we talked a lot about Hull House in Chicago, which was the first settlement house. And Columbus had a wonderful settlement house grouping here, which we've lost a few over time, but we still have St. Stephen's and some others that are doing a great job in the community.
Yep, absolutely.
So at least we went and learned our lessons with what was working in other cities.
And I will say that Carrie happened to be married in 1898 to the mayor. By name was Sam Black, but she did all this on her own. And Sam actually was the person that created the juvenile justice system here in town. He was an attorney and a lawyer and didn't want to be mayor, but they needed somebody, so he became mayor for 2 years, which was their term limits. But what a little power couple they were.
Right.
And so we have an awful lot of – somebody had a lot of brains at our place and threw things into boxes, history. And we've got a lot of great pictures, a lot of great history. Ohio History Connection has some of our stuff, but we're very fortunate, and we – play off that all the time because it's been quite a little ride.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, LifeCare Alliance has changed dramatically over the last 120 years, of course, but the mission stayed the same. What's changed over the years in programs and services, and ultimately what's happening in our community that prevents us from fixing those situations?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if they're ever going to be totally fixed. When I hear somebody say we're going to cure hunger, we're going to cure homelessness, I think those are great aspirational goals. We're going to be gone before that happens, probably, unfortunately. Yeah. And it's just because of volume and other issues all around the country. And again, in Central Ohio, we're probably much better off than many communities. We're significantly ahead. But in the last 125 years, what's changed is that we were the nursing group. We were the health department until 1950. And then the government said we need a health department. And they did that. And we acted as that, but we were a nursing group. And then when the Older Americans Act came out in the 60s under Lyndon Johnson, that came out with this pilot program of the idea that, we could take a meal into somebody's house, because every study ever done, still to this day, says the way you stay independent in your own home is by proper nutrition. That's number one. Now, exercise is catching up, and there's some other things that are up there too. But nutrition's number one. So they tried this pilot program 50 years ago with Philadelphia and us, and we've had that ever since. But in the past 22 years since I've been there, which is what I know best because I've been there, one of the big trends in nonprofits is if you merge agencies, you can get more services to more people at less cost. Because think about it, there's only one of me being paid. There's only one accounting department, one human resource department, one copy machine, et cetera, and you can pack everybody into a building together. So we've taken on a number of other agencies. We've taken on 4 other meals counties. We're one of the few in the country with more than one county. And we're probably, with COVID now, coming out of COVID, we may be the largest nonprofit based on number of home-delivered meals in the country, believe it or not, for Meals on Wheels. But we've added this healthcare side of the business, which we knew people needed. So we've added the Columbus Cancer Clinic, which does not cure cancer, doesn't operate on anybody, but helps people through. We've added 2 diabetic service organizations. We've added an AIDS organization. And last year we went to arthritis because there's many of the national organizations that have a disease in their name that are going all research all the time because you can't lose money. You know, it comes in, you research, and they want to cure it. Great, be my guest, but who's helping you through? So we were asked by some people here in town to take on arthritis services too. And I would tell you the number one diagnosis amongst our almost 30,000 clients in our database is diabetes. Number 2 is arthritis because we have diagnosis for people. And I would tell you that it's just a tough thing to get through. So we took that on. And we do other things, and then we do social enterprise, which is we have a catering company, and we do corporate wellness for people just to make money so we can stay in business because we have to do that. And we've done other things over the years that we think have really gotten a lot more services to a lot more people. And they're really, I know this is me talking, so you're listening to me, Gehring, running LifeCare Alliance, but there is nothing like LifeCare Alliance with all these services packed together in one place anywhere in the United States. And that has been proven. And I will tell you, the feds are actually studying us right now. The federal government folks from the community living offices, which is the old Department of Aging, are actually studying us and they're getting information out that this logic works. So let's share it. And we've always shared, but they're trying to formalize it more so that more people can get out there. Unfortunately, on the meal side, we are probably through COVID now. We went up 68% when COVID hit in 2020, March of 2020, in home delivered meals. Think through that in your business. You suddenly had 68% more product
with a quarter of the number of staff and volunteers to do the work.
Yeah, and then we're currently up 75% 3 years later. So it hasn't gone down; it's gone up because they found more people that suddenly lost supports or whatever during COVID. I mean, it's just a tough time. People just don't have money right now, and the prices have gone up tremendously. So they've always struggled between. To your question, Brett, do I buy my medicine this month? Do I eat? Yeah, so you're going to eat first, right? And then you're going to buy medicine. And then, but a lot of times they don't know, and they don't know what they don't know. So they don't know that there are all these cool prescription pricing programs out there like GoodRx and those things, or that how Medicare works. And they're afraid to call the doctor because they know there's a deductible with Medicare. So we become the primary caregivers for most of these folks. But I would tell you, we're probably the only ones, to get back to my original point here, with COVID where it is now, we are probably the only ones, with very few exceptions, in the country with no waiting lists for meals. And I would tell you, if you're in Cincinnati, Toledo, or Cleveland today, you've probably got a minimum of 1,500 people ahead of you to get a meal. And 25% of our new clients are coming out of the hospital. So Brett or Carol, you go to the hospital, have your gallbladder taken out. They send you home 4 days later, assuming you had to stay a little longer. You had a heart attack or cancer. You can stay in the James for a couple of months without even trying too hard to be cured from cancer. And they do a great job with that. We have a great hospital system here. It's unbelievable, really. And but you come home and there's nothing.
Right.
So what do you eat? So you eat crackers and you go back into the hospital. And the hospitals don't get paid the second time because, if you go back into a hospital, a lot of people don't know this. If you go back into the hospital for the same diagnosis and within a certain period of time and you're on Medicare or Medicaid, the hospital doesn't get paid anywhere near what they need to be paid. So they don't want you to come back, but they've got to help you. And so our job is to get you home and then get there. So we start generally meal service within 24 hours the next day. So the hospitals know to call us today and say, hey, Carol is going home tomorrow. She had a heart attack. She's been here for a week and a half. We're sending her home tomorrow, but she needs help. She has no help. We will accept you generally, and you at no cost. Most of the people don't pay anything for our stuff, our services, and we will show up the next day when you get home from the hospital, and we'll have good, nutritious food for you, and you're off and running.
Chuck, I know before the pandemic, you always told us there was no waiting list. I just have to give you another pat on the back to not have a waiting list now, given all of the issues that we've had to deal with over the past 3 years.
We're very proud of that.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Now, I would tell you the agency lost $1 million last year too, but we're able to take care of that because of other years. But when you take, as I tell the board, I can dial the bottom line pretty much at this point in my life and being an old finance guy. But the way you do it is you drop clients. But we don't make it up on volume. I mean, you have left clients. And so there are some people, I had another city in the country tell me not too long ago, well, we don't have waiting lists. So we started comparing. And I said, that's great. I'm so thrilled you don't have waiting lists. Well, we found out that their threshold for taking you was a whole lot different than our threshold.
Right.
And so what some have done in the country out of need again, and I'm not being negative to these folks, but out of need, they've jacked up what the requirements are. What happens is the way you get – everybody thinks you get like Meals on Wheels based on your income. Wrong. You can be the wealthiest person in Central Ohio. We're happy to give you meals. We just might ask you to help pay for them. About 2% of our clients pay. The way you qualify for all these services, generally, especially the Older Americans Act type of services, are being assessed. And it's called Activities of Daily Living, which is an old assessment tool developed up in Cleveland, at Case Western, believe it or not, in the 50s, still used throughout the country. And they look at things, the first level is like, okay, can you drive? Can you cook for yourself? Can you get to the store? Can you physically bathe yourself? Can you get dressed in the morning? Then it keeps drilling down. It can. It depends what level you use. But then it gets into things like, well, can you transfer from a bed to a wheelchair? Things like that. And if you can't do that stuff and you don't have people helping you, then you qualify. And that's how you get and we're a city also, we're very proud of the fact here that we're one of the very, very few places in the country that takes people under senior age, under age 60. But I've got a veteran on the west side who's quadriplegic. He got shot in the neck while he was in the military. We're taking care of it. He lives on his own, takes care of it, but he needs our meals. He needs a nurse to show up once in a while. But how much money does that save?
Yeah.
Right.
Versus him going to a nursing home that's full anyway, and Medicaid's going to have to pay for it. So we save a lot of tax dollars also. So we actually have a bonus in our services is that we save the Medicaid dollars that were going to be spent on assisted living or nursing home care, which in Central Ohio right now, ARP tells us, this isn't even my number, ARP says is $89,000 on average a year for one person.
Wow.
And that's pretty true for a lot of nursing home and assisted living care. And they have their place. My mom died in a nursing home. Nursing homes are great. She had horrendous Alzheimer's, was tied into a wheelchair, had no idea who I was. And, it's unfortunate. I sure didn't want her to die there, but we would have literally kept her in our house watching her 24 hours a day because she would have just fallen over. She was a vegetable pretty much. And so there's a place for those homes and things. But a lot of people can stay in their own home with a little help.
Right, exactly. And so this goes to my next question. I get very frustrated when I hear folks say, well, can't they just go out and get a job? When you're talking about your client base and all the people you're taking care of, these are not folks who can just go out and get a job or who can afford to pay for caregivers or catered meals or open, what is that? What's the group that Grubhub?
Whatever it is, yeah.
But and it's not that they didn't take care of themselves for decades, and it's not that they didn't save. But there are limits on what an individual can take on cost-wise.
Well, 70% of our clients, I hate to throw all these stats at you folks listening to this, but it'll give you a little more perspective. Yeah. We do a lot of research with our clients. We have to. And 70% of them live on under $1,200 a month income, which is a Social Security check that they earned when they worked 20 to 30 years prior to this.
Exactly.
Think about it. Even if you go back to basket, we got the NBA finals and the pro football and all that, and they say, well, 20 years ago when I played, I only made $200,000 a year versus what they're making nowadays. Well, it's the same deal. The Social Security checks just they can't keep up. So they're doing the best they can, but think about $1,200 a month. And we're getting into summer when you've got air conditioning bills, or maybe you don't have air conditioning bills because you can't afford to turn it on. That's why we have our fan campaign every summer, collect fans for people. We do that too. But $1,200 a month just doesn't, try living on it. And I tell people, pick a 90-degree day and open your windows and turn your air off and spend the day in your house. See how that works for you. And think about doing that for 5 months, which is really what we're talking about here, because this goes into October. I mean, even if it's 75 outside, it can get pretty hot in a lot of these houses, and there's no circulation and stuff. And then, okay, can I afford, what can I buy on $1,200 a month for myself? And the problem is a lot of these folks, if you have a family and you have kids or grandkids who are taking care of you, that's wonderful. That's the way it's supposed to work. A lot of people just don't. Sometimes they've outlived them. They live in other cities. There's problems there. Grandma, give me money, type of thing. And as to your point, Carol, they would work if they could. And I would tell you, in our dining centers, which are part of the meals program that we have in towers and things where seniors live, medically challenged people live, we employ, as the coordinator there, one of the clients. Now, it's not a lot of money, but they love it because they're valuable.
Exactly.
And they're doing the meal orders every day, and they're walking around the building meeting people, and they're saying, hey, you ought to come to our dining center. We play bingo, or we have shows and all kinds of good stuff. And so they want to work. And I would tell you, some of the younger people out there that we're serving who have severe chronic illnesses, I mean severe stuff, they want to work, but sometimes they can't. They just can't, or they can't get that job. But you are seeing, I think, in the last several years, last decade especially, you see a lot of seniors working at Kroger and Lowe's and all these other, Home Depot and stuff, because a lot of times they just want to do it.
Well, absolutely.
But
We would see that in our office.
But they also need the money.
Yeah.
And you know it because you ran employment for seniors all those years. And people want to work. But sometimes when the pain is just too much, and COVID really incapacitated people. And I mean, if you had a chronic illness like a diabetes or a cancer, you go out into the community and you get COVID, you might have at the least been in the hospital.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you going to take that chance, and it just isn't going to happen. And so, to your point, Brett, earlier, why are we still struggling with this? Well, it's what it is. There's a lot of people that were good, solid people, like my parents, who worked hard all their lives, but then have a small Social Security check. That's what they got, and some savings, and they're doing the best they can. Yeah. But when you can't physically, and do we want everybody out driving around to the stores when they're, and I'm not saying you can't, because there's plenty of 90-year-olds that are better drivers than me probably, and us. But like my mother-in-law, who's 91, she's fast. She needs to be studied. She's so good. She's amazing. What a conversationalist.
You have to make sure she listens to this podcast.
She's phenomenal. Well, I tell her this all the time. She's phenomenal, but she's the exception, not the rule.
Right.
And, we're still dealing with a generation of 80 and 90-year-old people who smoked, who were Vietnam vets. My neighbors got Agent Orange. I mean, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not trying to blame the military or anything here. I'm just telling you what's going on. So why it hasn't been fixed is, and the number of seniors and elderly is the fastest growing group in Ohio, and now it's got the biggest group in Ohio. So it's getting attention because they're the people voting. And I can tell you, we help our people sign up. We don't tell them who to vote for. We just say, hey, read. And online to some of these folks is another story. They don't have online, but they don't have the cell phones and all the cool stuff that we have sometimes, but they can watch television. All our clients watch TV, and they can educate themselves, and they vote. And, so I think we're going to continue to see increased focus from our elected officials. I'm anxious to see this next presidential campaign, especially since the Democratic runner is going to be 82 years old, almost, when he's running, on this focus on, we're educated too, and we're going to vote. Yeah. So it's interesting.
And this is what's scary And I think why it's important that we have this conversation with you today on Meals on Wheels and the services for seniors is that this population is growing. And the statistic I always use from the Scripps Gerontology program at Miami is that in another 10 years, our population in every county but 2 will be at least 20% over 60.
Yep.
And so if you've got 25% over 60 and 25% under 18, there aren't a lot of people who are going to be able to drive the economy.
And that's the way it is across the country.
Right.
And if you have seniors who have discretionary income or discretionary savings, then they will help drive the economy. But you're just going to have a lot more people who are on this.
Right.
The other thing that happened over the past many, many years, when Pat Tiberi was a U.S. congressman, he now runs the Ohio Business Roundtable, he gave me a graph years ago, and he says, Gary, we love you. We'd love to give you more money, but here's the reality of the situation. And basically he had little Pac-Men. Remember Pac-Man? Little Pac-Men on this graphic. And it said, the federal budget has a discretionary portion and a non-discretionary portion. The non-discretionary portion is the mandated stuff like got to pay Social Security, got to pay veterans benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, that kind of stuff. And the discretionary part of the budget is often the Department of Defense and everything else, okay? And around 1975, the discretionary part of the budget was the vast majority. It was 75% of the budget. That has flipped. And the bottom line is, as Pat used to tell, Congressman Tiberi used to tell me, is that as we saw this Pac-Man, it just keeps eating up the discretionary part. And now the discretion, and if you do your taxes and you go online to irs.gov, look at the 1040 instruction booklet. The last couple of pages actually has pie charts on how the revenue comes into the government and how it gets spent. And if you compare that back, which we have done, there's just no discretionary. The discretionary part of the budget is just shrunk. And it just isn't there. So for us to keep getting funding becomes difficult. And we've given no government money back over the years. We like our friends in the government. We're about 40% government funded. When I got there 22 years ago, we were 92% funded by government and United Way. It's now 40 on a good year. And we gave nothing back. It's because they just don't have the money.
Right.
And so it's been good through COVID because they had the CARES Act money and then the American Rescue Act money, certainly, which has helped out tremendously. Well, we just couldn't have taken the clients without it. I mean, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts. There were a lot of people that got it, but we're now going to have this Medicaid cliff, as it's called, which is happening around the country as we speak. It's going to happen more in central Ohio at the end of the year because our county of Franklin, we're in multiple counties around here, but Franklin, we'll quote them, they've done a great job of supporting us, and they're going to support everybody that we've got in service that they can through the end of the year, 40% funded by the government. And but it's coming, and I don't know. One reason we haven't, to Brett's point again, one reason this hasn't been cured is the funding has been horrible until recently. If we delivered a Title III, which is Older Americans Act, federal meal, and I'm throwing this out so you can Google Older Americans Act, you can Google Title III. It's B, C, D. You'll see the different categories for different things. If we delivered one meal to one person in Franklin County. Until recently, we got $3.70. And that's with the increased price, with chicken going up 54%, with not being able to get everything. We're still up across the board 22% in food cost. And my broccoli is cheaper than your broccoli because I buy a lot of food. And so food is something that really gets discounted the more you buy. Because they can store it easier, they know what to carry. It's just how it works, and it's something that really becomes a lot cheaper with your volume. And we're still up 22%. The trays the meals go out in are up. We had 8% price increases in those in the last year and a half. I mean, and people were like, and I'd ask them, so why did your price go up? Did the materials cost more or whatever? Well, it's just the way the economy is, which means they can, right?
Yes.
We saw this in automobiles.
Sure.
The discounts went bye-bye. Now they're coming back again, right?
Right.
And people were charging above sticker price on cars and stuff. Now it's coming back down a little bit. So, and I was just reading an article today about eggs. Eggs became
Oh, goodness. It was like
horrendous.
gold. Yeah.
And now they're coming back down. They're dropping. They're going to go back to old levels and things. But, these are cycles. But the reason it hasn't been cured, Brett, is the funding is so horrible for some of this stuff that so we're 33% now at our agency, and we're a big agency, and this number is the biggest you're going to find in the country. We're 33% of our budget comes from private donations, corporate donations, and grants. And I'm not talking about government grants. I'm talking about corporate grants, things like that, different organizations. And fortunately, there's a lot of wonderful foundations, private family foundations, stuff out there that have started up over the years that want to give back, and they're trying to give grants out and stuff. But the funding for this is horrendous.
Horrendous, yeah. Well, the Meals on Wheels is likely the most familiar program that you have. However, it's not just about a meal. I'm guessing there are many more people receiving meals than we realize, and the service includes more than just dropping off a tray of food. Talk a little bit more about this great program, who's receiving the assistance, the value of staff and the volunteers, and the importance, of course, to the client in the end. It looks to be that human touch, which is really cool.
Well, it is, and that's kind of going away. I hate this. This is one of my favorite topics. I'll tell you. We actually have for-profit competition these days in Meals on Wheels that have come into the area. They will not deliver, any of them will not deliver a hot meal. So the way we have always done it is you get a hot meal. We show up at your house at lunchtime because, in December in Columbus, Ohio, it's dark at 4 o'clock.
Right.
Can't see your house number. And frankly, the best time for you to have your big meal is in the middle of the day for digestion, especially as you age. So that's how the program was started federally. And if you use the name Meals on Wheels, let me just say this to you. You're supposed to follow the federal guideline that meal is at least 1/3 of your daily nutritional requirements, and it's low in fat, sodium, and sugar content. So, for example, every meal that goes out from us is almost always, the whole meal is under 1,200 milligrams of sodium, which is salt, right? If there is a fast food group that shall remain nameless, they're not headquartered in Columbus, Ohio, so I'll throw Wendy's out of this. They have pretty nice stuff. But they have, if you look on their website, it gives nutritional elements. And if you look at their grilled chicken sandwich, so this is a grilled chicken sandwich, and you dump the mayo or the sauce, and so you have a grilled chicken on a bun with lettuce and tomato. It's got 2,500 milligrams of sodium. And our meals, the whole meal's going out at 1,200. And the reason for that is, as the chicken goes down the line at Tyson Chicken, they inject it with salt because it's a preservative and makes it taste good. So why wouldn't you? We buy the chicken, it hadn't been injected. And but our meals, the point is they're low in fat, sodium, and sugar content. If you choose as a client to put salt on it, it's great. But here's the point. We always delivered the hot meal at lunch, like I was saying, and we still do that with our volunteers and our paid drivers. And then if you qualify for 2 meals a day, which means you really have no help, and some people get them 3 days a week. Some people get 5 days a week because maybe your daughter lives with you and she's home on the weekends and can cook and things like that. It's how you qualify. So you got to qualify. I mean, this is not just giving stuff away. And but a lot gets 7. We are the last group in the state delivering 7 days a week, and weekends and holidays, because we feel that's very important. To your point, Brett, we're getting to the point about the touch, the daily touch. But we do hot meals. So they bring out the hot meal at lunch. If you qualify for a second meal, it's a deli-style cold meal. They put it in your fridge. All you do at night is take it out, eat it. You don't have to touch it. It's a salad. It's a sandwich, whatever it might be, side dishes, all healthy stuff, but tasting good too. Meatloaf is always top on the hit parade for us, and things like
for all of us,
it would be mine too.
And lasagna and spaghetti and meatballs and things like that. And we now have a cheese omelet though that's hit number 1 on the hit parade.
There you go.
But the point is, you get that hot meal, you don't have to do anything. And as you age, maybe you get a little forgetful. And we find people all the time. Our route sheets, if you're a volunteer delivering for us, they have the client's phone number on it. Because sometimes people fall asleep in the chair just watching television, right? I know I fall asleep in chairs sometimes watching television. And so they do that, so they got to be called and things like that. But my point is, we don't really want people using their ovens as they age and get a little more forgetful.
Sure.
I would tell you recently, we did this survey a few years ago, but not that long ago, 15% of our clients on the meal in Franklin County did not have a microwave oven they could use. Two parts to that sentence. Didn't have a microwave oven, couldn't use it. My mom, at the end, with her Alzheimer's, had this microwave oven I bought her for some stupid amount of money that had all these buttons, and they were heating up their coffee 12 times a day and having popcorn. It was great, and she stopped using it, and we started seeing Post-it notes on it. I said, "So why aren't you using it like you used to?" And she says, "Well, it's kind of complicated. It's got all these buttons on it. You don't. How many 90-year-olds have a smartphone?
Right.
And so they don't have that capacity. So the hot meal means something. The second thing is if you're getting a hot meal, one of our volunteers or paid drivers is showing up at your door at lunchtime every day, knocking on your door, and besides giving you the meal, they're talking to you for a few minutes before they go on, and they all say, "How you doing?" And some of the clients, they know, we get incident reports that I see all of them all the time that, well, they found Joe on the floor. Joe's comment is always the same. If my kids fell out, he might be fine. He just couldn't get up. If my kids find out I fell, they'll put me in a home. That's always the comment. It's always what they say. I'm not making this stuff up. We find people in distress. Well, my chest really hurts, but I don't think I should do anything about it. You hear these things, or you go in these houses, a 90-degree day, and the house is horrendous, or in the wintertime, cold. They set their thermostats at 60 because that's what they can afford, but they're happy there, okay? But every day somebody's looking at you saying, "How you doing?" Well, what happened a few years ago, because they wanted to have more choice, at least the funders did, is they went also to frozen meals. So some of our for-profit folks that come in and do them, and I'm not being totally negative about them, but they do only frozens, which get delivered once a week. And what's happened lately that I think is the most horrendous thing I've ever heard of is they're drop shipping these things. So you are an elderly person who doesn't move well, who probably doesn't go out on the porch because it's got a step and you're afraid you're going to fall. And here comes the box from the delivery company. And we tried this a few weeks ago. We ordered one. It was a 28-pound box of food. So first of all, does your freezer hold a week? A week of 2 meals a day is 14 meals, or 14 meals if a lot of them are delivering once every 2 weeks. So does your freezer hold 14 meals plus milks or juices plus fruits? Do your bananas wait, and are they still good after 14 days? No. And things like that. And the person can't handle it. They can't pick up a 28-pound box. We take it into the house, so it's important. But that touch every day, if you're the daughter or that you're the son, Brett, and you live in Kansas, but mom's here and you're on our service, one of our people is in that house every day for a few minutes. How you doing? And, the stories. People tell us we've saved their lives. We hear this constantly, and we're not patting ourselves on the back, but that's part of the deal. But now it's gotten commercialized, and, can we just drop ship meals? And, gee, we'll make $1 off this. But, we had a for-profit company just give everybody 30 days notices. We do Marion County, too. In Marion, they gave all their clients 30-day notice. You are required, if you have a meal client, if you're not going to keep servicing them, you have to give them a physical letter to address to them, 30 days notice. They gave everybody 30 days notice. Hey, can't do it anymore. We're not making any money. Yeah. Well, what a surprise. This is not a money-making deal. McDonald's does not deliver to your house for $4.
Right.
And I don't know what you would get from McDonald's. Nothing against McDonald's for them, but I mean, they can't do it.
No.
For what we're getting paid and stuff. So that's why we need volunteers, and that's why it was developed this way. And Meals, I'll give you a bar trivia here, so you can be real smartest person in the room. Meals on Wheels, really, the concept was developed in London, England during the Second World War because the Germans were bombing London, and the seniors didn't leave because they had nowhere to go.
Right.
And so they came up with this idea, let's take food into them. And so the government of the United States under the Older Americans Act, when Johnson was president in the 60s, said, the survey said, let's try that. And it worked.
Yeah.
So that's the deal.
Going back to Brett's question, what you've mentioned is when there's a critical issue, somebody's sick, somebody's fallen or whatever. But over and above that, having somebody there in the house saying hello to you every day, it's that notion of loneliness, of isolation. Right. And just that little tiny bit may be what keeps that person going.
There's no question. Every survey
Yeah.
says that. And one of the weird things we do that people may not be aware of, the number one program that Meals on, and we're local, we report to a local board. Meals on Wheels does not have a national controlling organization. It just happens to be a well-known brand. One of the unusual programs that people don't even know we do, and it's the number one program requested by Meals on Wheels organizations in the country. They all want to start it, is pet care. So you're saying, what in God's name is that? Pardon my using God's name in vain there. But the point is this. People give part of their meal to the pet to keep it because they're to the point they can't carry the 50-pound bag of dog food out of the store.
Right.
They can't afford to take it to the vet or get it to the vet. But that pet, I always like to say the pet is the social worker, the depression counselor, and the security device in the home. And I have stories to back this up. We don't have time today, but I have stories to back all those up. And so the pet has to be saved. So what we do is we get donated product. When we started this, you started it with no money. You copied it off San Diego, but there's only about 7 to 8 major cities right now in the country doing a major pet care program. We could be one of the largest. Again, we have 1,200 pets right now. Wow. We have 18 routes on the weekends that do nothing but deliver pet food. It's not people food, just the pet food. And the pet food, most of it comes from Walmart. Used to be thrown away into a landfill because of code dates and stuff. But this is all within code date. And now Amazon has just joined in, and a couple other folks, the IAMS folks, the CalCan folks help, but a lot of it's you got to give Walmart a lot of credit, let me tell you, for this. We probably have 8 to 10 pallets, large pallets of bags of dog food and cat food in my warehouse. But you got to have a separate room for it because it's got to stay away from the people food, and it can attract critters and bugs and stuff. You got to be very careful with it. And a lot of the bags are broken. Walmart actually goes to, and I'm not here to boost Walmart, but they're almost semi-saint-like people over there, and they appreciate what we do with it. If the fork truck hits the bag and breaks the bag, they will duct tape together the bag, throw it on a pallet, and deliver it to us.
Fabulous.
And we are getting this out. It gets rebagged into bags people can use, and it allows the person to keep the pet. And you shouldn't give your Salisbury steak to the cat. It's bad for both. You need to be eating it if we're giving you the food, and the cat doesn't need Salisbury steak. And so pet food is a huge thing. It's the number one requested program around the country. People are trying to start it. They just don't have the space. They don't have the manpower and stuff. I mean, we're lucky to have a warehouse on the west side that controls all this stuff and stores it. But pets are everything to these people.
Sure. Right. And
so
going back to that notion of isolation.
So you want to stay in your own home, it's nutrition, exercise, and the Gehring study, which is totally unofficial, is third is pets. Third is pets.
Wow.
That dog or cat is amazing.
But it's logical if you think about it. It doesn't even need a study, if you think, and so the Gehring study's official.
Absolutely.
I mean, come on,
we're naming it official. It's official for our.
I mean, come on, it's common sense.
One quickie story. I'll get at this very quick. This woman she took her hearing aids out every night to go to bed. She was by herself, had one cat, and had left the oven on with something on the top on the stove and just forgot about it. It fell asleep, was elderly, and wakes up a couple hours later, and the cat is literally standing, and I know you can't see me because this is podcast, but the feet are on her head, on her face. So if the cat could talk, the cat was saying, if you want to die, fine, but you're getting me out of here. Okay? But she woke up because the cat's on her, it's a true story, on her face, sees the smoke, and gets out. Calls 911, had a flip phone, and got the cat and her out. And had she just stayed asleep, she would have died. That cat saved her life.
Yeah.
And she said that to us about 1 million times. The cat saved my life. And we got a little blind guy on the west side who shouldn't describe him like that. He's a lovely man, but he's got 3 mixed breed dogs, and they are very mixed breed, little dogs. They are not trained in anything. He gets up to come to the door because I take food out to him once in a while. He has his door open, but he has a screen door, and you see when he gets up out of the chair to come to the door, these 3 dogs get on either side of the legs like guardrails, and walk with him to that door.
Mm-hmm.
They're not pilot dogs. They've never been trained, but they know what's going on.
They know what he needs.
So they're their pack. Yeah, it's a pack. Yeah,
so there are many
exactly.
ways to. We're very blessed here in Central Ohio again, in that we've got 18 routes on weekends delivering to 1,200 pets to allow the people to keep. And we pay a little bit of vet bills too.
Wonderful.
So but you got to do it.
So there's another program that I love that I want to talk about. It's sort of I don't want to say it's an offshoot of Meals on Wheels, but it's another look at meals with your friends. So you have Carrie's Cafe, and you had also mentioned that there are congregate settings at different areas. I used to volunteer for one of our other senior facilities up in Delaware County. I have to give it a shout out to Source Point. That's my neighborhood.
Yep.
And so I used to go and have lunch.
Yeah.
So tell us about Carrie's Cafe, which is named after Carrie Black. Yeah.
We actually have about 25 right now. I think we just are opening our 26th dining center. They're generally in places where people live, but ours is in our building, and we will transport people into it. But it provides not only the meal, but socialization. So they're doing activities, but they're meeting people. I mean, they're exchanging phone numbers, and they're calling each other at night. I mean, it gives them a life.
Right.
And things like that. So it's a very important thing, and it is part of that. But I was talking to a major city that had 22 dining centers. This is a West Coast major city, shall remain nameless. And they had 22 dining centers. And the executive director was saying to me, well, we've decided that when COVID gets done, we're just not opening them back up because they're too tough to run. They cost a lot of money. Well, yeah. Yesterday at our place, we had our client fashion show, which we do twice a year. We have other things, and some of the clients were modeling, and it's just the greatest thing you've ever seen. And we can hold 300 people to 400 people in our place, and we're very blessed to have that. But these congregate dining facilities are very important. And actually, we here, which is an unusual thing, we have the oldest Asian feeding program in the country. Dr. Young Chen Liu, emeritus professor of statistics at Ohio State University, started this thing years ago, and he works a lot on the Asian festival here in town, But they started this program 27 years ago, so we actually use a couple of Asian restaurants here in town where the people can go, and sometimes we transport them in and get a very traditional meal.
Fabulous.
Like seaweed soup or something like that, that very traditional, so they can think about what they used to get. And we also operate with a few Somali restaurants here in town because we have a lot of Somali immigrants, as you know. But again, these programs, let me just say this for the 84th time, if you go, don't think that this occurs in every city in the country. I get people call me all the time, well, who's you, Gehring, in this city?
Right.
It doesn't exist. There might be pieces of programs. There might be a Meals on Wheels program that's going to tell you, hey, it's $5 a meal. And what we tell people, the Area Agency on Aging's, there is one of those established by the government with the Older Americans Act, wonderful people. There's one of those for every county in the country. Now, ours here in Franklin is down on South High Street, but it covers Franklin, all counties touching Franklin. But they have people, you can Google, if you're one of the kids listening to this and you got parents aging, you Google Area Agency on Aging whatever city, and they've got people that will sit on the phone with you and tell you what's available in that location.
Right.
And that's very important because if mom's somewhere else, you might have to bring mom to Central Ohio to get more services. There might not be services where mom is or ones that they get. And we started a program called, I wrote something called How to Take Care of Mom and Dad years ago, and we've done that for 150 places. I mean, it's all major corporations, churches, whatever. And it's what do you do now to get ready for this?
You know, I think that that is really what we try to get across here on the podcast. You don't know what you don't know. And here are our experts to tell you not only what's going on in Central Ohio, but to make sure that we provide the resources for around the country. So we will do that on our show notes when we post this episode and talk about who, okay, so you live in Colorado, who do you call?
Well,
and here are the websites that'll tell you who to call.
And hear what's available there.
Right.
And I always tell you, if you're going to move mom and dad here to be close to you, check out the county, because the counties, even around Central Ohio, don't all do the same thing. They don't all have, like we have the Help at Home program, which is homemakers who go in and actually clean, do laundry, home health aides are bathing you. That program exists, but most of the time it's $24 to $34 an hour for that service. We can provide it for free if you qualify from an income and a needs standpoint, and that doesn't exist in other places. So you got to check out where you're going to move mom and dad to, and I get all those calls all the time. But what we do at How to Take Care of Mom and Dad, and this program I wrote, it's a lunch and learn type of thing. But it's very simply, it's what can you do now? And do you know where your parents' assets are? Do you know where the paperwork is? Do they even have a will? Do you blah, 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 et cetera, because they always have those lists on TV and in the newspaper and stuff that say, here's the 10 most stressful things in a person's life. And they're things like getting married or divorce or job change or moving. Well, I think number one is got to be your parents just fell, or you just found out that mom doesn't remember anything.
Right.
And I just think that is the most stressful thing ever. And I've got almost 30,000 clients with it, but I've got a mom and a dad. I had a mom and a dad until they passed away that went through this, and we went through it with their dementia. And I'll tell you, you gotta, if you want to cut your stress, figure out now what you can do. How can I prepare now? Where does dad keep the will and the house deed? And does he have a DD 214, which is discharge papers, because you can get a lot of veterans benefit. Get all that stuff organized now, and it will really cut your stress down. I mean, incredible stress cut. And maybe we'll do another podcast on that someday.
Well, and actually, we have a podcast with one of our local lawyers that does elder law, and we'll get you guys together. Yeah, and we've talked about that.
Be a good one to do. Yeah.
Well, and Chuck, too, that's how I sort of got into aging services, is taking care of my parents. So, I think when you've been through it, listen to the people who have been through it. They're going to give you some really good tips. So,
So LifeCare Alliance has taken on some new programs over the years. We touched upon it a little bit earlier in the podcast, expanding your mission and geographic location, of course, too. So talk about the other programs, the seniors, senior farm markers, CODA, wellness programs. My gosh, let's talk about that.
Well, what we do, and we've always done this, at least the last couple decades, is we look at the client and say, what do we need to do for you to solve the ultimate goal of LifeCare Alliance, which is to keep you independent in your own home for as long as you are? What do you need to accomplish that? Well, you need a meal. Maybe you need a nurse once in a while. Maybe you need something else. So we've taken on some other agencies to save money, basically to get more services to more people at less cost. Because, again, there's only one building, there's only one accounting department, things like that. But the point is, these were all services that the clients needed. So
with every program you added, when I heard it in the news, it made sense.
Well,
knowing the mission, well, that makes sense.
The number one diagnosis of the meal clients is diabetes. And half the meal clients have type 2. Type 1, you get as a young person, usually you're insulin dependent. Then type 2, you get naturally as you age because you're not exercising, you're eating poorly, things like that. So half the clients have type 2. So over the years, we'd call people, hey, can you come out and counsel people? No, don't have the resources for it, et cetera, et cetera. So when Central Ohio Diabetes, back around 2016, 2017, they were having some financial problems and said, we're not a big agency. We ought to merge with somebody. They knew we were interested. They looked around and ended up with us. Well, now we've got all their people stayed, basically, and they're counseling our people, and they're having tremendous success at getting people off the drugs. Like, if you get type 2, the first thing you watch all these, and please don't run to the store to get Ozempic tonight and things like that, because you're not going to find it anyway. It's not weight loss magic, but it's not out there right now because people found it can help you lose weight, but it helps with type 2 diabetes and things like that. But the first thing they usually do is put you on metformin, which is this little $4 drug pill you take. And but the way we stay off waiting lists is oftentimes, as we tell people, is we prevent you from needing us. So our work, especially a lot of our nurses' work, our dietitians' work, is to keep you educated and help you through whatever you've got and keep you off the pills and off type 2 diabetes, et cetera, so that you don't need us. So our dietitians are counseling, a couple dietitians are counseling like 120 people a month on average, and they're getting people healthier. Okay. And it's not rocket science sometimes. It's just, but my mom and dad, we had meat and potatoes every night, right? We didn't know any different. But, you can't have pie every night. You can't do this. And if you're sitting watching TV, do leg lifts while you're sitting in the Barca Lounger. There's little things like that make humongous difference. So all these additions we did were designed to ultimately solve the mission of the agency, which is keep you independent in your own home and really prevent you from needing us. And that keeps our numbers down and keeps you off waiting lists. And I'm very proud. I think our people should get medals. They've done a fabulous job over the years of keeping people healthier and not even needing our services. Maybe they thought they needed our services, but with a month of help, maybe they suddenly didn't need our services anymore. They could take care of themselves. So all this stuff is designed and taken on just for that. The farmers market is
you empower your clients, which is great.
Yeah. Farmers market is to just get access to healthy produce in the summertime. The wellness programs, of course, and impact safety helps with domestic violence and safety issues, which 30% of seniors have, and we could never figure out how to address that. So
staffing your programs, you've got either paid staff or volunteers, has to be a continual challenge, especially, COVID, I'm sure, was major, but at the same time, now we're kind of coming out of that. But tell us about your great staff. You're volunteer driven. You've talked about this already. What do you do to retain a good staff, and what's the role of volunteers?
Well, retaining the staff, you try to be professional with them and respect them and treat them nice and pay them a decent wage. One of the reasons we lost money as an agency last year is we've been raising wages to the point that, especially amongst the hourly folks who are lower paid, maybe in food production or maybe in the help at home realm and things like that, we've had to really increase pay to be competitive. But we're happy to, and they've hung around. And they realize, we try to remind them often that, this is not working for company X. When you go home at night, you will have changed somebody's life. And we get story after story, day after day about people calling us saying, boy, I just don't know what I would have done without you, and something like that. So we try to do the best we can. Our senior staff especially, who are the leaders of our agency, have really hung around during COVID. And it was tough because everybody was pretty tired. Yeah. And we've worked hard. I have never worked this hard for 3 years in my life, and I've been working for 40-some years now. It's never been like this, but we're getting it done, and people are staying because they see the outcome and they see what they're doing. But we try to be as competitive as we can. Do we pay as much as everybody else? No, but we are close. The role of volunteers is, if we didn't have our volunteers, you wouldn't be talking to me. I would be fired, and we would be out of business. We have about 240 staff, about half are full-time, half are part-time to do all this stuff. The rest, if we had to hire people though to deliver the meals, then take over for the volunteers, we'd have to have 1,200 to 1,400 people, which means we'd be gone.
Right.
We couldn't afford it. And the Meals on Wheels program especially was designed to be delivered by a volunteer. We can train you in 20 minutes and out you go. And it's fun, and you can take your kids with you, and the dog can be in the car as long as you keep it away from the bags of food and stuff like that. And people have a great time with it. And but the volunteers are just, we would be out of business. It just doesn't work. So we do Champaign and Logan counties. Champaign has Urbana, and at Logan has Bell Fountain. It's just northwest of here, basically, those two counties. In 2014, the agency that run that for years, on a Wednesday, the executive director called their board chair and said, we can't make payroll Friday. They shut down and went broke. They had nothing. The clients were calling the police department. This is why the Bell Fountain Police Department has a route as volunteers. They go out in the uniforms with the guns and the whole thing in the cars, and they deliver meals, because they got called during this time and said, well, if I give you $20, can you go to Kroger's? And, that's not what they do.
Yeah.
They couldn't do that, but the people didn't know what to do because this agency had gone broke. And we see this all across the country. 1 out of 6 Meals on Wheels groups in the country has gone broke in the last 10 years. And the number's growing quickly. So we were asked by the state, could you take it over? We did. And we've helped Champaign and Logan ever since. But let me give you the numbers. So they didn't make their own meals because they didn't have a way. They didn't have a kitchen. You got to have an industrial kitchen. You got to have volume to do this stuff. and they were buying the meals from a restaurant. They were fine meals, but they were paying the restaurant about $4 a meal at the time, back in 2014. They were getting reimbursed by the government $4 a meal. You were already at zero.
Mm-hmm.
Then they didn't have volunteer coordinators and things like that, and they thought volunteers were hard to get, so they used all paid drivers. You're now in the hole. They got grants to buy cars. Great, but then you had to change the oil and buy gas. Farther in the hole. Do we see why they went broke?
Right.
And if you're not using, we've got this model we talk about, if you're not using volunteers, if you're not fundraising independently, 33% of our money comes from private and corporate and donations and grants. If you're not fundraising, you've got to have a little money in the bank. You've got to do things like social enterprise, like we have a catering company to bring in money to the agency. I don't get the profits. It goes to pay for people and things like that. And these mergers, that if you're doing those things, you're good. If you're not, you're dead as an agency. So the volunteers are everything. And Champaign and Logan, because they didn't have any volunteers, frankly, is why they went out of business.
Right.
And if we didn't have volunteers, you wouldn't be talking to me.
Right.
So I also have to give a shout out to the LifeCare Alliance board, who are volunteers, because my cousin's on the board.
Who's that?
Earl Levere.
Oh gosh, yes, I know that.
Yes, and Earl Levere's mother is also
Carol
another
Ventres.
Carol Ventresca.
Oh, that has the same name.
I have to give a shout out to Earl, and I can't wait to send him the link to this to tell him that I talked about him. But again,
he's our board treasurer.
I saw that,
and a large attorney in town. He's
Yes.
a big time, not large physically, but a big time attorney in town, and he's
Yes.
very helpful and been on our board for a long time. And
Yes.
I just talked to him yesterday, and he's very helpful to us.
Yes, he is. He's a wonderful, wonderful person. But as with boards, they're critical in the structure of a nonprofit. So for our listeners, maybe volunteering as a Meals on Wheels driver is not an opportunity, but your local nonprofit may need critical board members. So always
absolutely.
keep that in mind.
Or committee members or whatever, and
Exactly.
things like that. And it's just call. And if you don't get an immediate, boy, I got an opening for you, because sometimes we don't have openings, but you know, we'll get to you. Trust me. And there's something you can be doing.
Right.
Like the front desk at our cancer clinic is run, which is when you come in by volunteers, and basically you come in, here comes the client. It's like, well, I need you to fill out these 3 sheets of paper. You're at a cancer clinic. You know, you might have a screening or something with a professional, so you need to fill out something, and they handle that kind of stuff. And we have volunteers that run the dining centers. We have volunteers everywhere. The majority of them by far are in Meals on Wheels.
Well, and for all of those job seekers out there, volunteering is an incredible way to gain some experience that you may not have had before, or hone some skills or update your skills. So consider that.
And we see some boards that are really asleep at the wheel. It's not about your resume. Sometimes it's about, do you really want to help and provide advice? And by the same token, if you have an executive director like me, and I'm telling you, well, I don't really need to listen to you, or I don't need your advice, don't worry about it. We got it handled. Probably find somebody new for that job. Champaign and Logan, that I just talked about a minute ago, that quick story is the Dayton paper, because they're out there that way, and they followed up with the board chair, who was a business guy, and just kept asking him, well, how did you not know you were going to go broke this week? Because it was Wednesday, they found out they couldn't make payroll on Friday.
Right.
How did you not know? He finally says, this is the board chair, and I'm sure it was embarrassing to him. Well, we hadn't seen financial statements in 18 months.
Ooh.
If my board did not see financial statements for 18 months, I would have been gone after 2 months.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Right.
And I mean, as board members, they need people who have those skill sets, and you don't have to be, number one is CPA to figure out the financial statements. A lot of them are very simplistic, especially smaller groups. So smaller groups need you badly, and they just need your brain power. Boards are more than just giving money to the organization. I always tell the board members, we need your brains.
Right.
And we try to throw at the meetings into discussion topics and try to throw things at them and say, what do you think about this? Mm-hmm. What would you do? And you get good responses.
Exactly. And that goes right into my next question. What are the future plans? What's LifeCare Alliance got kind of in the trenches and working towards for a new goal?
Well, staying in business was always a good one for another 125 years. We're 125 years old. But what's going to happen in 2023 is you're going to see it around the country before you see it here, but you're going to see it here at the end of the year, this Medicaid cliff. So when President Biden announced on May 11th that the COVID is no longer a national health emergency, that triggered in Medicaid, and there's Medicare folks, which is the insurance for seniors, but then there's Medicaid that covers people who are basically low assets, poor people, that triggers in Medicaid that you had to get reauthorized, because what they did during COVID, they kind of opened it up a little more and took in some people that maybe were on the border, maybe wouldn't have qualified, but now because of COVID, they couldn't get out. They lost their supports. They needed the help. Well, now it's coming back to reauthorizing you and seeing how you are, because we have to reassess clients depending on the funding source at least every 6 months and sometimes every 3 months. And because people get better. If they're on our meals and they learn how to cook for themselves, they might not need us after so many months. And we see that, especially with hospital patients all the time. Right. They come out of the hospital, they might be with us for 8 to 20 weeks, and then they don't need us anymore. So that's great. And so this COVID cliff is happening. So we had a lot of people in for an event yesterday, clients, and I was talking to some of them. And I said from the stage, I went up at the end and I said, remember, if you're getting Medicaid, you have till August 7th or August 9th, I think, to reauthorize yourself in Medicaid. And I got more questions after that. Well, how do I do that? Well, how does that work? And I said, do you have somebody? They all have case managers. Right. They all have somebody they talk to in the Medicaid office. You need to call them and get reauthorized. It's not automatic, and frankly, the volume is too great. They're not going to get to everybody, because in that second week of August, you're going to get cut if you're not reauthorized, and they don't know, maybe you don't need it anymore. And I think we all want in the country, we hear about this all the time, hey, if you don't need the services, it's not welfare, let's get off of them, right? And sometimes people do get better, especially people that had temporary issues. And I hate to call cancer a temporary issue, but cancer is something, if you get through the treatments, OSU and Ohio Health can fix a lot of stuff anymore. And you get through your 4 to 6 months of cancer treatments, maybe you're good then. And off you run, well, you don't need us anymore. Right. So you don't need those services and things like that, or rent's paid or utilities paid. So this cliff is coming. You're going to see it around the country. You're going to see people, and there was money that came out through the American Rescue Act and CARES money, and we had some of it, to pay rents and utilities for people. That stopped. That's stopping after this year. I can tell you here in Franklin, there just isn't any more money coming out. So people suddenly are going to have to cover all these costs. Good luck. Right. What's changed for them? Now, maybe they've got a job at a good employer that suddenly is paying them more money, and they're making a nice wage now, and they're good. But maybe they're not. Right. And with rent having taken huge leaps. And utility prices go up. I mean, everything costs more. Right. So, and, they're not buying as nutritious a food maybe at the grocery store because it costs more, so they buy something cheaper that's, Right. Yeah. You can't all be college students living off ramen noodles, right? Right, exactly. And we did that because we were 20 years old. When you're 80, it's not the same deal. Yeah, exactly. And so you got to have this. So you're going to see this cliff coming. So that's the near term. Got to happen. Long term is endowment. From my perspective, we've done an endowment campaign recently and been able to put a little bit of money in the bank. We are not Ohio State University, and they're wonderful people. I'm a grad. But we don't have an endowment like they have. We have a few bucks in the bank, but you've got to have some bucks in the bank to be able to take these extra people as we go forward. So long term, we'd like to build that up and just make sure, I'm not going to be around forever. And, not that I'm anything to write home about anyway, and they probably want to get rid of me, but I'm not going to be around forever. We've got to make sure we're set up for the future. We got the right staff there to manage. This is a complicated company. Let me just tell you, I've worked in for-profits. This is about the most complicated place. I work for Anheuser-Busch, and this is a more complicated place, I think, Absolutely. A lot of days than Anheuser-Busch. And it's just a lot of tentacles out there, a lot of different geographic areas, a lot of different needs. And it's a complicated deal, and we've got to make sure. And we've talked about this in Columbus. We have a group of some of the larger agency leaders who get together every couple of months. Mm-hmm. And the big thing we're talking about is how are we training the next generation? If you've noticed, when the person retires, they often hire outside the agency. Why don't we have people inside that can be trained to take over these jobs and properly trained, and off you run?
Right.
And so there's a lot of work to be done in that area. It's all stabilization stuff, and sustainability is the word we hear all the time, is how can are these programs we have sustainable? And if they're not, some agencies are saying, well, we can't keep them anymore.
Well, and I've been in private industry. I worked for government. I worked for the university and for nonprofit. And I have to say, nonprofit work is the hardest, but the most fulfilling in terms of knowing that every day you make a difference in your world.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we've looked at is in the aging agencies is how do we convince young people that going into an aging career path is a good idea and something that they can really make a great career with. Well,
it's interesting, the modern generation, and I've got 4 kids and 10 grandkids. And that are the oldest grandkid's just 11 though, so they've got a ways to go. But I am encouraged by kids in school nowadays. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of kids, we hear about the bad stuff, but there's a lot of kids that really want to make a difference. Mm-hmm. They really do. Mm-hmm. And my father's, the way he made a difference, he went into the Army and fought in the Second World War. I mean, that was their contribution. Right. Hopefully we don't have that.
Right.
But there's a lot of kids that are looking, and kids, I mean people 25 and under, really. I mean, they're, pardon me for calling you a kid, but there's a lot of people out there looking for something different in their life. They want to make a difference. And we are, you're not going to be the wealthiest person in the world, but we pay competitive wages. Mm-hmm. And, if I hire an accountant tomorrow, I've got to pay a reasonable amount or nobody going to come.
Right.
So it's there are ways out there to help, and it's worth exploring. I mean, I never thought I'd be sitting in this chair, ever. But 22 years of this at LifeCare Alliance, and I am so honored and privileged to do this job every day. And I'm just like, I work very hard at it because I don't want to mess it up. And because there's too many people counting on us, and but if you're out there, you can make a huge, huge difference as a young person, whether it's maybe you just volunteer, maybe one Saturday a month you go out and deliver meals or something. I mean, that makes a difference because we package you together with a whole lot of other people and good stuff happens. So there's a lot of people looking, though, for jobs in our world now. And I think that's great. And hopefully they'll continue to come out and do it.
Right.
I think he just gave us our words of wisdom right there.
I don't know. Chuck may have more words of wisdom.
But what do you want to leave us with?
Anything else you want to make sure our audience remembers from today?
Well, if you're listening in Central Ohio, know that LifeCare Alliance is here to help you. If you're somewhere else, call your area agency on aging and get ahead of the problem. If you've got parents, or even for yourself, you need to get prepared for this. Unfortunately, we're all going to die. We're all getting old, and we're all going to die someday, which I know is a real downer to end this on. But you got to prepare for this, and you got to let people know what's going on and get your paperwork in order and get your plans in order. Let people know what you want and figure that out and start planning. It's more than buying a long-term care policy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those are expensive anyway. It's how do and I know we all are trying to retire early and things like that, but you can make such an incredible difference in your community. I could not go to Africa and be in the bush and help people in darkest, poorest Africa. I just couldn't do that, I don't think. But I'm able to do this. Mm-hmm. And the saints that are doing that work right now is a whole nother story. But I can't go to some third world country, and we're not asking you to do that necessarily. You can do something in your town or area in the third world countries. Trust me, they need a lot of help too. But, you can just go in your town and deliver a meal on wheel on a Saturday. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's not hard, but you will change somebody's life.
Absolutely. Oh, my goodness. Chuck, thank you. We can't thank you enough for this wonderful conversation. Listeners, this has been an amazing experience. Make sure that you check the website. When we publish this episode, you are going to have resources locally and nationally that you'll be able to use in your particular area. But first, let's thanks to our guest, Chuck Gehring, who is the president and CEO of LifeCare Alliance, for joining us today. Listeners, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to check the website for show notes at lookingforwardourway.com. It'll give you all the information and resources that we discussed today. And we're looking forward to hearing your feedback on this episode and all of our episodes.